نريد لبنان ملتقى وفاق عربي.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri says there is a positive atmosphere in the formation process of a new Lebanese government. Qatari Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani is in Beirut on an official visit to express support for Lebanon's recent political breakthrough. And European shops and markets are tightening security ahead of Christmas after a U.S. warning to its citizens to be vigilant amid an increased threat of terror attacks. Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri says there was a positive atmosphere in the formation process of a new Lebanese government. In his weekly meeting with MPs at his Ainatina residence, Berri said he hopes the remaining minor issues in the way of forming a new cabinet under Prime Minister-designate Saad Hariri are resolved. Berri's remarks come only 2 days after tensions emerged between him and Hariri over the delay in the government formation. The two leaders, however, appear to have settled their differences when they met for Independence Day celebrations on Tuesday. Berri's demands, as well as those of other Lebanese parties, have delayed Hariri's efforts to form his cabinets. Qatari Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani is in Beirut on an official visit to express support for Lebanon's recent political breakthrough. The minister has met with President Michel Aoun at Babda Palace and conveyed him a message from the Qatari Emir, inviting him to visit Doha and fortify bilateral ties between the two countries. He is also expected to hold talks with prominent Lebanese officials, including Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri, Prime Minister-designate Saad Hariri and caretaker PM Tamam Salam. The Qatari FM will also hold a joint news conference with his counterpart, caretaker Foreign Minister Gibran Bassil. ISIS militants returning from Syria could carry out mustard gas attacks after learning how to use the toxic substance in battle zones. An inquiry by the United Nations and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons concluded in October that Syrian government forces were responsible for chlorine gas attacks and that ISIS militants had used mustard gas. Western officials are increasingly worried that Islamic State, which is fighting to defend territory it seized in Syria and Iraq, will call on its followers and extremists returning from the region to increase attacks in the West. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says a vote by the European Parliament on whether to halt EU membership talks with Ankara has no value, and again accused Europe of siding with terrorist organizations. Leading members of the European Parliament have called for a halt to EU membership talks with Turkey because of its broad purges in the wake of a failed July coup. More than 125,000 people have been detained or dismissed over their alleged backing for the putsch in what opponents, rights groups and some Western allies say is an attempt to crush all dissent. Coming up next, Colombia's government will sign a new peace accord with FARC rebels after a previous deal was rejected in a referendum last month. Stay tuned. Welcome back. European shops and markets are tightening security ahead of Christmas after a U.S. warning to its citizens to be vigilant amid an increased threat of terror attacks. French Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve said there was a complete mobilization of the country's anti-terrorism service, as France has just arrested 7 people suspected of planning a militant attack. Mana Rabia reports.
The holidays are starting, but good cheer is in short supply. Christmas markets in Europe have tightened security following U.S. travel warnings to its citizens over an increased threat of terror attacks at holiday venues. The organizer of one Berlin Christmas market says everyone's preparing.
Danger can never be ruled out, but my hope is that our square is not the focus in Berlin. At least that's my hope.
And for many shoppers and vendors in Berlin or here in Munich, defiance of the threat sends an important message.
If we let ourselves be limited in our movements, that's exactly what they want, that no one leaves home anymore.
In France, the police presence seems especially pronounced. After the deadly 2015 Paris attacks, they're doing what they can to make sure this holiday season passes without violence.
Ship carrier Lufthansa says that it is canceling 912 flights tomorrow, grounding 115,000 more passengers as pilots are extending their strike by another day. The airline had already scrapped nearly 900 flights that affected 100,000 passengers after pilots staged a walkout in a row over pay and working conditions. Moving on to Latin America, Colombia's government will sign a new peace accord with FARC rebels after a previous deal was rejected in a referendum last month. President Juan Manuel Santos and FARC chief Rodrigo Londono are to sign the agreement in Bogotá's Colón Theater on Thursday morning. The agreement is then expected to be approved by the country's Congress, where the ruling center-right coalition National Unity has a majority. The FARC and government negotiators introduced some 50-plus changes to the original accord that failed to convince voters. At least 9 civilians were killed and 9 injured in Pakistan-administered Kashmir when an Indian artillery shell hit a passenger bus in a disputed region. Pakistani officials said the ambulance heading to the site came under attack as well, and locals arranged transportation for those injured, taking them to hospital in private cars. The UN-backed tribunal in Cambodia has upheld a lower court's life sentences for 2 former Khmer Rouge leaders convicted of crimes against humanity. The 2 leaders were sentenced to life in prison by the lower court on August 8th of 2014. More in this report.
A UN-backed court ruled on Wednesday against an appeal to spare life sentences for 2 former leaders of the Khmer Rouge. Nuon Chia and former President Keo Sampan listened as the ruling was read in court. The ruling orders the prisoners must stay in court until they're transferred to government prison. Wearing dark sunglasses, 88-year-old Nuon Chia, known as Brother Number 2, and 83-year-old Keo Sampan were found guilty of crimes against humanity. They, along with 2 other defendants, were accused of genocide during the 1970s Khmer Rouge regime under Pol Pot. Between 1.7 and 2.2 million people are believed to have died during the regime, mostly from starvation, torture, exhaustion, or from being bludgeoned to death during mass executions at killing fields. The majority of people in Cambodia were born after this era, but for some who survived the regime, the ruling offers little condolence. The verdict is just little justice for me, this 59-year-old survivor said. Why? Because we were tortured, starved, and our family separated. One of the 2 other defendants in the case has died. The other was declared unfit to stand trial. Pol Pot died in 1998.
The Afghan saffron industry is becoming a rare bright spot in an economy struggling to get to its feet, providing more jobs and opportunities, particularly for women, and showing potential to reduce the grip the opium trade has on the country. Julie Nost reports.
A group of women in the western Afghan city of Herat work to separate orangish-red stigmas from purple flowers. This is saffron, the world's most expensive spice, at about $1,200 per kilo. Here at the Ariana Saffron Factory, it's separated by hand, then dried, and finally packaged. According to the head of the company, Afghan saffron is fast gaining a reputation for its quality. We export to France, Sweden, Germany, the U.S., and Arab countries, he said. There's a huge demand in the international market. Still, competition remains fierce from neighboring Iran. Afghanistan produces around 4 tons a year compared to the more than 200 tons that Iran produces. And after decades of war and lawlessness, the UN estimates that the opium trade is still bringing in about $3 billion a year. Back Back in Herat, female workers pick the flour in the delicate harvest process, which is only available for 3 weeks in October before the flour begins to die. Besides its profitability, another bright spot in a country struggling to get to its feet, saffron cultivation provides paid work for women whose employment is limited by social conventions. There'll be more job opportunities for women, one worker said, because all of the saffron workers are women, and they take part in the harvesting process.
Ellen DeGeneres has pulled off a star-studded mannequin challenge video at the White House. The chat show host and media mogul was among 21 people at the iconic residence being awarded the 2016 Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. Others taking part in the ceremony were rocker Bruce Springsteen, Motown soul singer Diana Ross, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates and his wife Melinda, former basketball champions Michael Jordan and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, as well as actors Tom Hanks, Robert De Niro, and Robert Redford. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri says there is a positive atmosphere in the formation process of a new Lebanese government. Qatari Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani is in Beirut on an official visit to express support for Lebanon's recent political breakthrough. And European shops and markets are tightening security ahead of Christmas after a U.S. warning to its citizens to be vigilant amid an increased threat of terror attacks. Those are your top stories in English for today. I'm Linda Tamimina. Thank you all for tuning in.
نريد لبنان ملتقى وفاق عربي